All right, Allison, go ahead and take that away.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Securing your research, MSSND, and that stands for the Minimum Security Standards for Network Devices Made Simple. Next slide. So we'll talk. Oh, can we go back up one? There we go. All right. So we'll talk about what the minimum security standards for network devices are, why they're important, how to apply these, and this will be like a step-by-step walkthrough. So you're trying to do the right thing and have a secure environment for your research. We're going to walk you through it. We'll talk about like specific securing research specific to security specific to research and some of the things you need to be thinking about and hopefully have some time for Q&A. So with that, let's dive right in. So first, like, why does this matter? Why should you care? Well, I mean, if you'd see what I see every day, I think you would, because just picture you're going into your lab, you log in, ready to start, doing this like world-class science that Berkeley's known for. And instead of all of your research, there's just a screen that says, that you need to send money to some place or you'll never see your data again. It's a horrible feeling. It's a horrible place to be. And it's very easy to end up in that position if you don't have some basic precautions in place. We see it here on the campus all the time. And we want to make sure that that is not what happens to our research data and that you know what you need to know to protect yourself. If you end up having a cyber incident, even if you don't lose your data, maybe you have a backup, which is great, but it can still have impacts. It can be downtime for your lab where you can't be doing the research that you want to be doing. You could be set back in your career because data is missing and you can't get it back. And it can also affect our institution's reputation. A lot of times these incidents have to be reported to a funding agency or to a partner that we have data use agreements with, and that really affects our institution's reputation and may make it harder to get money and share data down the road. So this is why we care and we want to help you out. So what are the threats to research? So the big one that we want to really cover that I think, like I said, is a threat that we see frequently around here and can really be damaging is ransomware. Three of the main ways they get into your computer so that they can hold your data for ransom, delete it, make it unavailable. We see insecure remote access. So you have some way to get into your lab from home or from other places and that it isn't using a secure protocol. So it's easy for attackers to get in that way too. Just think of it like a front door in your house without a lock. Weak passwords, that's another way you can, even if you have a great secure remote access protocol, you need to have a password to get in. And if you have a weak password, it's easy for attackers to get in. And even if you have a great password, it could get stolen from you. And we see a lot of this, believe me, quite a bit, phishing attacks that trick you into giving up your password. So this one's been going around. I'm really happy to share it just because we've seen so many people affected by this. Salary compensation, everyone cares about their paycheck. Yes, I would love to know how much I'm getting paid. But there are some red flags here. And so, before you go to click, just take a look. Like it says internal HR or human resources department. But we all know here at Berkeley, they're not called human resources. It's people and culture. The branding's all wrong. Were you expecting this? Did you talk to your supervisor about a salary compensation package coming your way? It doesn't hurt to just take a beat and check before you click. So here's some example of if you did click on it, then you're going to go to a page like this that's asking you for your email and your password. You'll see this is not the CalNet page that we all know and love, so that should be a big red flag there. Don't put your password anywhere but CalNet. Next page. And sometimes they try to look like CalNet, but if you look at the URL bar there, it's a Google form. It might be another strange URL that has nothing to do with CalNet. If you go to the next one, you can see CalNet always starts with auth.berkeley.edu and then slash, and there'll be a bunch of gibberish, but you want to look for that auth.berkeley.edu. If you don't see it, don't put in your CalNet. And if you're ever not sure, again, you can check with people. But these are the kind of things that we want you to know about so that you don't lose your password, because none of these protections are going to do you any good if they have your password. Cool. All right. So now we're going to dive into minimum security standards for network devices. We call this, you must be this tall to ride the network, because this is the minimum. This is the important word here, is minimum for any device on our network, whether it's a laptop owned by a student or any device coming to our network at all needs to meet these standards. It also applies if you're connecting, say, from VPN or whatever from home, or you're logging into systems with our data, then the MSSND applies as well. So the idea here is just make sure everybody's meeting like the basic minimum requirements. And I mean, definitely we need to go beyond that, but this is a great place to start, like the baseline level of safety. If you go to the next one, there are 9 of these requirements, and on the walkthrough, we'll go through each one, so I won't go through them, but they do touch on just the things I said: remote access, stealing credentials, weak passwords. Next one. So again, like I said, these are the minimums. There are some special considerations, and they're going to get into more of this, but I just wanted to make sure that, don't think you can go to the minimum and stop there if you're using any kind of higher protection level. So we have our data classification standard, and there's different protection levels. If this is P3 or P4, you definitely have to go beyond. If there's high availability requirements, like you can't afford any downtime, then also you want to go beyond. And again, like I mentioned, a lot of times grants and contracts for funding have cybersecurity compliance requirements in them that you need to be aware of. You may have data use agreements if you're getting your data from a partner, and they also have cybersecurity requirements. So, Research IT is the best partner to reach out to if you have any of those types of concerns, and they reach out to us to help you develop a security plan that will, you start at MSSND and then you go up from there. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Jake to do our walkthrough.
Jake, you're muted.
There we go. Hi, everyone. Jake Harwood. If I haven't met you or got a chance to grab coffee with any of you, I've been here for a while. And I'm going to go through some of these basic configurations. Next slide, please. We've seen this list before, and a lot of these things can be done either come out of the box this way, machines now configured. Some of them can be Googled, answered. So because of Windows, Mac, and some Linux users, I'm going to only zero in on 3 of them. And the first thing, next slide, please. The first thing to say is the way to meet like 90% of these requirements is to get the Berkeley desktop through ITCS. So if it's an institutional device, which would be purchased with a blue card, your department funds, or a grant, some people get confused on grant money, but a grant money device could be taken to ITCS and an entire installation would be put on it with all of the Berkeley security software configured correctly, and you'd just be meeting all of the requirements. Almost all of the requirements. There's still some stuff around backup. Next slide, please. So I'm going to zero in on just 3 of these real quickly. And I wanted to kind of give a little bit of a backstory of why it's important or what happens when we don't do these things. And I've only highlighted 3 here, but I wanted to carve out a 4th, which is that number 8, which is you need to back up the data. We've seen this time and time again where they had it attached to the same computer. They backed it up, but there was a USB cable and it rendered that backup useless. So the first thing you can do is just make sure you're doing good backup somewhere, preferably offline or a cloud storage sort of piece, and making sure that it's approved storage for your particular data classification. So I'm going to zero in on running updates because it's probably the biggest thing I feel can be done. The second is to talk briefly around the strong passphrases and why we have that. And then the super important creating a separate account for your admin stuff. Next slide, please. So on Mac OS, this is really simple, and that's what all of these are pretty much almost configured out of the box. So you just go into settings. You can type in updates, and you'll get to the settings under general, and there's a tab for it. Next slide, please. And you can see here on my device, I've got some pending updates ready. There's some ones down below for Safari. So they all just pop up here, and you're able to update on your when you click the button, and things are kind of taken care of. Next slide, please. For Windows, it's pretty much the same. If you open any of these sort of tools, both in Mac and Windows, and type in updates, the pages automatically sort of pop up nowadays. So it's not as complicated as it used to be. And in the Windows, we just go into settings. Down there at the bottom, you'll see updates. We zero in on updates. We click the button, and it'll show we have some. And then you can click to apply. A lot of times this is pre-configured and will just tell you that you need to restart to make Windows patches active. Next slide, please. And it's not just about the Windows, the laptops. Your browsers need it as well. And I've been guilty of this once or twice, needing to wait until after the next meeting before I click that update button because it's going to relaunch your browser. But these browser updates are extremely important. And next slide, please. What we're trying to mitigate here with those browser updates is a drive-by ad attack. And this is where an attacker will turn up an advertising site with Google or another platform, create 9 benign advertising, and the 10th one will include some sort of a script, exploit, or something like that that will attack the browser. And what happens is, as you go surfing the web, you'll hit a website, you'll get a banner ad. If it's the 10th, you're getting the special one, and then something's going to run on your machine. Next slide, please. And you're going to say, oh, I would never fall for those banner ads, right? We all know what those look like. Next slide, please. But this is CNN. And next slide. And another MSN homepage. These ads can show up anywhere. They can look like anything. Reputation doesn't equate to security. If your browser's up to date, it won't run that code. But if you're behind 1, 2, 3, 4, you never patched it, then you're going to have a really big problem. And next slide, please. And this is typically what happens. We see one of 2 different cases. You hit the ad website, even a reputable one. You get the exploit kit, malware gets installed. Typically, this is under the user's account, not necessarily the system account. And we'll talk about what that in a future slide. But once you get this malware, one of 2 things will happen. Your machine will become a zombie in a bot network and be reporting into some bad actor that can then control it for denial of service, other attacks, and things like that. They actually get paid for however many bots they bring into a particular net. It's a very commoditized endeavor, the bad actors. The second one is your device can be used as itself and ransomed, or potentially as lateral movement for another device. The second scenario we see on browser drive-bys is crypto mining. And so they don't even need to actually drop a file onto your file system. It'll just run JavaScript that does crypto mining on your machine, and your machine becomes really, really slow. And that's it. You know, they're making their money off this. But every single one of these is kind of driven by a financial back end to gain access to networks for ransomware or commoditizing remote PCs. So next slide, please. If it's connected to the network, it's a target. And this one specifically is paramount to researchers. We've seen this most often in the research community. These are small storage devices. This one probably has 32 terabytes of data. They can be plugged directly into the network. They can be plugged in with a USB cable, and they're fairly cheap. In this QNAP, you would go into your settings page. There's a firmware update. You select it, you get it from your website, and you upload it, and you're up to date. And people don't do that. And we have had a very large problem with these QNAP devices. And so we've seen them, about 6 of them have been, to our knowledge, have been compromised over the last number of years. One of which was then encrypted the entire device. And so these things are, and it goes to that backup. Oh, I backed it to this device, but it was plugged in, or your computer had access to that same device. That is not a real air-gapped backup. And so you will tend to lose your data, even though you think you have a valid backup on that network-attached storage. So next slide, please. The second one is password complexity. And passwords are one of those things. There's a lot of beliefs on which way is the right. People changing passwords so often, not changing passwords so often, complexities. There is something to this. And these are the requirements for the campus. The longer your password, the harder it is to crack. And 11 to 8 characters, if you're going to do something like that, you need to have all of those special characters in there to kind of make it as hard to crack as possible. If you use a shorter or a longer password, then we don't need to have as much complexity in there. So again, if it's 12 to 15 characters, mixed case is just fine. And 16 to 19, just characters and mixed case is fine. 20 characters plus, there's no restriction. And you'll notice we've highlighted passphrase up there rather than password, because if you are using a password, it is so short, it's probably going to be a very bad thing for you. And so the passphrase, any number of lines from a Shakespeare poem, your favorite song lyric, add a couple of digits, add your favorite emoji, and it's a pretty decent password. Next page, please. And here, this just sort of shows you the time it takes to brute force a password. And there's a lot of these charts out there, and people use different methods for calculating them. This is a fairly reasonable or respected site, although I have a little bit of problem with their number-only passwords taking one day. But you can see here as we move from left to right, numbers only, lowercase letters, upper and lower, and then you get to that side channel where we have everything upper, lower, numerical, and a special character. We get really far into you're never going to crack that today without that quantum computer that's still a few years down the road. One thing I want to point out on this page is that this has been happening forever and a day. We used to use something called rainbow tables, Jack the Ripper, all sorts of tools and things out there. What's really interesting today, in that middle line, you'll see hardware, 12 RTX 590s. Those are those graphics video cards that are flying off the shelves for AI. And it's the same sort of compute power to do this brute force statistical piece to passwords. And so in this example where they're giving these numbers, they've put 12 of these together to brute force stuff. And the reason that's important, you're probably like, oh, that's $36,000 to get that many GPUs, and you still have to pay for it. That's not expensive if we're talking millions of dollars worth of ransom. That's relatively low cost. And the piece around some of that is, I'll date myself. My old Blockbuster password. Oh, that was released a long time ago. I don't even care about that anymore. Then there's my PetSmart password. Oh, I don't care about that anymore. I don't have a pet. All of those things are on the dark web. And as you start to pull people's names out and user accounts, you will see similarities. We get mailed passwords that were sent via the underground or various reporting services. So we know that there's a lot of them out there. And I was even on a case where there was millions of passwords, millions of Berkeley passwords. And it's just, they consolidate them from all of these different breaches. They sort them by organization. And then they go to, oh, here's Jake at Berkeley. Let's go to eBay. Is it the same password? Let's go to Chase Bank. Is it the same password? Let's try his Blockbuster. They'll just routinely run through all of those in sort of a dictionary attack with this high-powered compute infrastructure now. And it's just, it goes quick. And you've got a lot of passwords out there. We'll talk about password managers at one point, and the password managers will help this problem. If they find your password compromised somewhere out there in the clear text, they'll tell you need to change it. And there's even a button to help you get to where to change it, because that's often the big problem with these. So thank you. Why it matters. Like I said, we've seen 6 of these devices, all in research, some of them housing various things from DNA data sets to financial things. This particular brand has been notorious for having poor security, remotely executable, and we're on the internet for a lot of things. And so sometimes there's not a firewall between you and all the bad stuff that comes in. This was a 32 terabyte device. It was connected to a PC. The PC had a 3-character host name or system name, and the password for that system was set to 3 characters. And this is just to say there's people out there where this stuff is happening for convenience. And this is what the byproduct of that is. And it's not that hard. Almost all of the tools nowadays require a longer password. For the system piece, if you're running around as an admin user, it'll let you set a 3-letter password. And we'll talk about separation of accounts in another slide. Next slide, please. What makes it easy is LastPass. And there is some pieces to LastPass. LastPass has been compromised, but a lot of organizations get compromised. Their data was encrypted. We feel it is still safe until quantum comes out, which is the big nullifier to all encryption, or so they say. Here, this will allow you to get it free from campus. You can sign up for it. We use it to hand passwords back and forth for various services at the enterprise level. You can run it on your phone. It does 2-factor. You can have it hook up to your watch so you can hit the button to authorize into your password vault. It goes into the browsers. Has really sophisticated pieces. If you have 2 devices like a phone and a laptop and you reset your password on one, you can regain it if you have a valid login session on another, and some of these other sort of features. So if you're really trying to remember all of your passwords in your life in 2025, you're reusing your passwords. I could tell you. And we probably have all of them in a file somewhere. We notify people and then we erase those files, obviously. But the fact is we see a lot of them. And you can go to the CalNet page to see that and where to get the setup on that as well. So thank you. Next slide. The next one was separation of accounts. And so we talked about it a little bit on that browser drive-by. If you're running around as your average user, a standard account, and you get hit by that drive-by, well, it's going to install a crypto miner. If your browser is that out of date, it's going to encrypt some of your personal files, but it's not going to encrypt the actual operating system. If you're running around as root or admin with full privileges and that happens, your entire machine can be compromised. And then you have backdoors, they have access to the system, they'll look for lateral movements, they install keyloggers, and then anyone on that system, so if you lended it to someone else or it was a lab machine, it then gets those passwords as well. And it's not just the system password. You have one lab machine plugged into a microscope and a NAS or that storage device. Everyone logs in and then you want to check your mail real quick. You put in your CAS name and password, your CalNet. And in that case, that can be collected by that key log stroker. So things like that on these lab machines it's not just that individual thing. It can actually start to claim your account. And then they go to Bmail and can check things like that. They're still 2-factor, but let me tell you, we have a problem with people pushing the button on 2-factor. It's called alert fatigue, and it's a real thing. And so we have a lot of cases where people are pushing the buttons, and it's either because it's maybe late at night, or one reason or another, and they just don't seem to see it. So we are seeing people bypass multi-factor authentication. And when it happens, it becomes a large problem. So this is just a short go back real quick, please. This is just a short diagram of what you should be doing as a normal user. Videos, web surfing, most people do their bank in there. And that can be okay. I personally would segment another account just for my personal finances, but that's me. For the admin side, you really should only be using admin if you need a special type of update or maybe an OS upgrade, or you're adding a user because there's going to be another person on the system. With these, at least in most of them, Apple and Mac, it's really pretty trivial. They pop up a screen, hey, type in your admin's user account name and its password. It's not like you have to log out, log into something else, and then gain access to it. So it's pretty painless as far as that goes. Next slide, please. And again, these are very easy things to set up, and there's 1,000 Google pages on this. Open any one of the Windows search boxes, type in user, and you'll come to the set up an account. And it varies depending on the version of Windows you have. And then you have an option, as you can see there on the right side, to set up a standard user or an admin user. So typically, next slide, please. When you create the system on a Mac, the first account is going to be that administrator account. And so what you do is you just go into settings after the device is set up. You go in there to that center panel and then say add user. It'll ask you for your password, your current one. You'll set up another one. And then on that right-hand panel again, you can just see we set up a standard user. You log out and you just use that standard user. If you look at the center pane, you can see, and it's probably way too small, but the top one says Jake and the bottom one says LA Jake, hyphen Jake. And that's just local administrator Jake. And so it doesn't need to be complicated. It doesn't need to be sophisticated. If I have a patch or a printer or something I need to raise my elevation for, it just says type in the name. I do LA Jake, the password for that account. And it's that simple and it goes in. If you see that on a browser, all of a sudden, that's a very bad sign. That means they're popping it up. They're trying to get that. So again, alert fatigue is one of those things. Pause, protect, prevent. Right there. Next slide, please. And that sort of sums up those three that I was talking about. And I'll just go back to the fourth that I didn't get the slides in for, which is really make sure you have a good backup. It's offline somewhere else and keep it up to date. Thank you.
Okay. Casey, any handoff or should I just get going?
I don't see any questions in the chat, so take it from here.
Okay. Thanks, Jake. I learned a few things there. I'm furiously going back through repeat passwords as you were talking. So it's great. I feel like every time I'm on one of these talks, I learn a little bit more. And I guess I'm here to talk a little bit about, from the researcher perspective, kind of ways that this has all impacted my work at Berkeley and beyond over the past few years. We can go to the next slide. I think the big takeaway too that I'm going to talk about is you're not alone in all of this. And there are so many people that it's their job to help you make sure that you are doing as much as you can to protect your devices, the data you work with, and all the rest. So I'll come back to that. A little bit about me. I'm Scarlet Sands-Bliss. I'm a PhD student in epidemiology currently at UC Berkeley at the School of Public Health. And I'm going to use these little figures throughout the talk because I feel like I wear a lot of different hats, both at Berkeley and currently and at any given point these days. So I'm a student. I've also been a domain consultant with Research IT, specifically with the Research Data Management Program, Aaron, Rick, and Amy. And then I've also worked for the past 2 years between my master's, which I finished in 2023, and now I'm coming back to do the PhD. So I've worked as a public health scientist at a program called Tracking California. It's a program at Public Health Institute, or PHI. And all of this has come into play in all phases of that. So in the role that I have now, I focus on public health surveillance, and a lot of the work that Tracking does is turning health data into action. But it blends statewide environmental exposure and health data sets. So surveillance on using hospital, social security level health outcomes data, environmental exposure data sets. And then also I work with participatory methods and community-based trials. So that's prospective data collection and making sure that we're collecting information when we're doing surveys and interviews with folks that could be qualitative text data, numeric data, and making sure in all these different forms that the data is protected and we're following kind of these best practices throughout the process. So I say this all to just say, like, there's a lot of different ways that I think I've come to learning all of this. And we'll talk a little bit about in each of these sections, but you can go to the next slide. I'll come back to this at the end, but kind of my three takeaways that I think really fit into what Jake was just talking about is, first of all, you're not and shouldn't be alone in figuring any of this out. There are offices on campus that I didn't know existed when I started my master's. That is their full-time job to support you in all of the components of securing research data and securing your devices. The other thing that I'll talk a little bit about is just, we talk a lot about this in my research group now too, which I love the framing, but that there's a lot of hidden syllabi in academia, like ways that people go about things that aren't taught in a class, and aren't really taught until you're learning by doing it, or you have a really great mentor who knows that kind of a set of things to go through and learn with all of their students. So making resources really understandable and as available as possible is sort of the other part of it I'll talk about. And then the last, because it's pretty fitting that as I was putting together this talk a week and a half ago, my work email, so not Berkeley, but my work email got hacked in a very similar phishing attempt that Jake was just talking about. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and mostly just about the lessons learned that even you can do all of these trainings, and the best way of protection is to slow down and trust your gut. And if something feels off, ask questions and lean towards over securing. So with that, we'll move on into the first cap. Graduate students. In 2021, I came to Berkeley to work on my master's. And I was completely learning by doing, which I think is a pretty common way. Knew very little about research data management. The first study that I worked on was qualitative. So it was working with interview transcripts and then doing qualitative coding of them, which is a whole different kind of data than, biospecimen data or public health outcomes data. I had no idea where those files could be stored and shouldn't be. Like what questions I should be asking as I was making sure I knew kind of where the qualitative codes would be stored, which software I'm using, and how all these things integrate. And so I ended up that was the point where I was really asking a lot of questions. Some of those questions coming up here. Like there's going to be a lot of questions on these slides, right? But the point being, if you don't ask them, oftentimes you're opening yourself up to some level of vulnerability or the data that you work with. So I'll go to next slide. From there, someone in my research group told me about research IT and RDM. And honestly, I really admired her, and she had worked with research IT as a domain consultant. But it really started as a job and a paycheck during grad school. And what started as that has turned into working with research IT for over 2 years now, and information that I wish everyone has to take a course on if they're working with any kind of research data. Research IT, I think, as many of you all know at this point, is a first point of contact for faculty, postdoc students, and research staff to understand their research data and facilitate access to computing and support their research in every step of the way. And then RDM is just a subset. It works within research IT and then also with the library. And the goal is specifically with research data to be a point of contact to understand the right resources that best facilitate their approach and the ways that data needs to be stored, managed, et cetera. So I think the thing that I would say from this is I felt a lot of imposter syndrome going in to be a domain consultant. But one of the amazing things that the Domain Consultants program really does is encourages students who are coming in and work with any kind of research data to come and to learn as a consultant. So you're not supposed to be coming in as having all of the knowledge about this. The student domain consultants that are grad students in any realm of UC Berkeley campus come in with their own subject matter expertise and then learn from the research IT team all of this information and learn about where it already is and what they had access to, but they didn't even know they did, about how to learn about everything that we've been talking about today and much more. And so it's a really learn by doing and co-learning position, and pretty amazing that could be a job. So I believe they're hiring. Amy, Aaron, or Vic, jump in if I am wrong. But I just can't sing research IT's praises enough. And we'll say that that's a lot of where I learned a lot of this by doing it and by seeing all the different types of consults that come in from across campus. Next slide. More projects I worked on as a domain consultant. So I got really passionate. I mentioned I did a lot of work on qualitative analyses during my master's as well. That UC Berkeley didn't have a qualitative data management or a qualitative analysis software. And a lot of these are really expensive. And for students like me who might be working on professors' grants, but don't have their own discretionary budget to pay hundreds, sometimes hundreds of dollars for a software that they can do qualitative analyses, it's a big gap, I think, in access. And what it results in is a lot of students finding other ways to do something that could be much more securely done in prescribed and well-established software. So we know that there are certain other softwares like Deduce, they work very well, but they're really limited in some of their other capacities, and it's also cloud-based. And so if you need to be working within a secure research compute environment, there's challenges there. So I did a whole kind of uh, a mission, I could say, a needs assessment for qualitative data analysis software. I was working with Renee Starowicz at D-Lab as well. And though I don't believe it's been funded, a lot of data to support the fact that it would be really beneficial to have one is in existence, a proposal is in existence, and I hope that that one day does materialize into some sort of software. But I learned a lot about the decision-making processes at Berkeley, and the things you have to consider when thinking about research data software. And the next slide. I then all of a sudden realized, or, all of a sudden was handed a simple consult that came into research IT and turned into a much longer and more embedded project with the chief of police at UC Berkeley, Yogananda Pittman, who, like the incredible, I'm just going to say the badass she is, was also getting her PhD while being the chief of police at UC Berkeley. She was getting her PhD at Westchester University and was doing an analysis. Her dissertation title is on the left. She had interviewed and done a qualitative analysis interviewing top women leaders of top law enforcement agencies across the country. She had worked at the Capitol during the January 6th riots. She had this wealth of knowledge. And she knew nothing about qualitative data analysis, and those were the parts that I could kind of plug into what she knew and the wealth that she brought into what she was working on during her dissertation. So I ended up working kind of separately. It was a spin-off from a research IT consult, but it did definitely make me realize at that point that I had developed at least some level of chops of this is how to manage the text, the transcripts and the recordings that you're collecting, and then this is how to store the analyses in the code book and how to analyze the data, and how to write the methods sections of this paper, which is a big part of it too. So just this is, I guess, another plug for research IT, but just that it was really cool. Thanks, Amy, to see kind of the directions that these consults can spin off into. And I had such joy working with Yogananda. Next slide. And then I worked on kind of along the whole way, pulling together just ways to more simplify a lot of guidance that exists around different ways to do research collaboration within a team at Berkeley. I've worked, I would say, with the best and the worst in this arena in terms of, not worst is not a great way to say it, but the most organized and the least organized in terms of research teams that work with a whole range of lab biospecimen data to qualitative data, and everything in between. And the more that there is a structure within the research team that includes maybe undergrads, grad students, postdocs, and staff and faculty, of this is just the processes that our team goes through to make sure we're protecting whatever kind of data that we're working with. That in and of itself is training for the students that then come through, right? And so some professors are so overworked that they don't necessarily have a really comprehensive handbook of these are just our best practices. And then I've worked with some faculty that really do. And in doing that, the secondary benefit is they're teaching their entire team and all the students training with them how to then go off into their careers and bring those best practices along. So the other last thing that I worked on that I have now picking up the PhD this fall, I'm a little busy. So I'm not working with Research IT directly right now, but towards the end of the summer, I also work to translate some of the specific MSSEI or minimum security standards for electronic information, standards for using your individual device with P3 data. And so, and how to secure it, basically. And that's a big area that we've been getting a lot of consults from Research IT, just coming into office hours and asking questions. And there's, this MSSCI standard is large, lengthy, and very detailed. It has to exist. But then oftentimes being able to put on my researcher hat, I would not know where to begin if I was just referred to the MSSEI standard and say, go search and make sure your device is secure. So I worked towards the end of the summer and just kind of combining all of the working through every single place where every single standard required for a P3 data on an individual device, which is often a grad student or an undergrad working on a data set for their own research and just working on their own computer, but making sure that it's safely protected in all the ways that it needs to be. And at the very least, that's not published anywhere yet. At the very least, that's knowledge and information and a go-to kind of cheat sheet of all the things to make sure a researcher is doing when they come in the door at Research IT that the RDM staff have. And so another thing, if you're a researcher and you want to make sure that you're checking all of those boxes, if you go to office hours, plug for office hours, someone will be there with all of the information they need to walk you through and make sure that those are standards that you're meeting. Next slide. Okay, so the main message from all of that is that all the lessons from grad school and research IT really did come to play in the real world. I moved from academia before my PhD into nonprofit public health research. And I realized that everything I'd learned about data ethics and management security totally followed me. They weren't abstract ideas. They showed up in everyday questions like these one. What clinical trial data management platform should we use to comply with NIH policies? What survey platform, transcription software, and data storage should we use for interview data? How do we assign unique identifiers and keep those separate from participant responses and have a master password for the administrator? All of these things that play into how we actually did our work on a daily basis and were many of them I found were areas that I had information about or knew where to find it that people on my team didn't necessarily have yet because they hadn't worked in research data for that long. And so much of this is self-taught. So the truth is, I felt like in grad school, like I said about the research groups, like it's training of the workforce to securely handle protected research data and not just run the analyses. It's a lot that you don't learn in a classroom. And if I hadn't sought out this kind of training myself, I would have had to rely so much more on others. I think I wouldn't have been given kind of the autonomy or the trust in the projects that I've worked on over the past few years that I had. And next slide. So these skills really matter. These were other questions, kind of just more seeding ideas of the things I've had to talk through and work with my team on over the past few years. And I think that another thing that I have been thinking about a lot as I've experienced kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly with other research teams and how they've gone about collecting public health, related data, research, surveys, interviews, et cetera, is that you learn your practices from the person that trains you really matters in terms of how you learn and how you put it into practice down the line in your job. And I say that because you can come into a lab group that has this standard of we uphold all human subjects research ethics, and we know that we're good at that, and we know that we consider that. But their actual standard practices might actually not be up to date, and they might not have gone through and understood all of the things that were shared in this presentation, for example, recently. And so it's a constantly shifting and changing and needing to be retaught thing that really depends on who trained you and the type of kind of ethics and approach that they had. I'll go to the next slide. I even learned this the hard way. My work email got hacked, as I said, a week and a half ago. It came from the tribe that we do a lot of work with, and the main work that I do is with tribes in Northern California. A lot of our approach to working with tribes is that we're trusting and really responsive as we can be, as quickly as we can be. And a lot of times things don't look the same way. Their IT is even less advanced than our small nonprofit. And so things can come through looking like a funky attachment, right? But their whole composition got hacked, sent it through mine, and now I understand because no money was taken, no adverse events happened other than they've hacked through our emails. Likely it was part of a much larger phishing scheme where they just profited a little bit from me. Um, but I would just say I knew in advance not to put protected health information in my email. And one of those things is, though it was incredibly, scary and embarrassing and all of those kinds of feelings that come up when this happens to someone, even though it was a really advanced phishing attack. And as everyone said, it would have happened to any one of us. Um, it's about protecting the people behind the data and making sure that none of this goes into your email is just another way that like we are a barrier in terms of protecting all of the data that we work with. We as humans who need to slow down and take everything with an extra level of critique before clicking on it. And that these lessons matter everywhere. They matter in nonprofits, tribal governments, research labs. Um, they're really important. So I'll go to the next slide. Back to these kind of three takeaways. On the first one, yeah, researchers shouldn't and don't have to do all of this alone. There's services like Research IT, ISO, and all the other offices on this call and around campus. Find them, seek guidance from them before there's an issue. There really aren't stupid questions. I think that's the first one. And then it's too much of a responsibility on researchers to know all these things. So it's reasonable to expect that people like Research IT and ISO will help play that role in communicating the very technical language around following this guidance. And then the last one, like I just said, slow down. Fishers really do prey on us rushing and not paying attention to little details. And then go with your gut. If you're not sure someone is adhering to their IRB well, just ask. If you feel like something could be more clear related to protected health information, go with the more protected environment, ask the question, lean towards over securing. And with that, we'll go to the next slide. Thanks so much for having me.
Scarlett, thank you so much. And thank you for also talking about your experience with getting fished and having that. I know it's terrifying and it's something that generally we don't want to admit happened, but it happens. And so thank you for sharing that. Are there any questions for any of our panelists today? I will go ahead and check the chat. I know we've got some plugs for graduate student domain consultants, flexible part-time hiring, um, some links on Scarlett's work with Dr. Yogananda Pittman, and also a link to the research collaboration toolkit. Um, Amy, I see your hand up.
Thank you to all the speakers. Jake, I was really interested in your kind of hinting that quantum coming is going to be an issue. And I'm wondering how far out in the future is that? Is that something that the Information Security Office is closely looking at? I'm very interested in that topic and hoping you could say more.
Sure thing. We keep an eye out to emerging threat in the landscape, and it's AI is the big one that's kind of right here, right now. And quantum is out there, and we kind of joke about it and things like that, and it isn't taken really seriously. And then at some point, I noticed Apple and a couple of other providers are starting to work on quantum resistant encryption. So the big players out there that have multi-billion dollar, user bases are starting to adopt this technology that's different. It's a different type of algorithm, doesn't lend itself well to that sort of a hacking piece. So we're not doing anything with it at all, except paying attention to it and seeing what others, the larger corporations, are doing. Microsoft's in there pretty deep on the quantum level, and they're coming up with a bunch of technologies and pieces that go to it, but I don't know how close it is. That's way out of my. There's probably some people on Berkeley campus who could answer that, but it wouldn't be me. I just know that we should be talking about quantum resistant encryption and other quantum resistant things. And it comes down to some fundamental math stuff, primes, things like that. There's plenty of other ways to do ciphers. So One other piece I guess I would add to that is I got this from a CISO at another university, NYU, and it was around most of the stuff we have at the university is not sensitive 10 years down the road. If it's, a lot of the things we have are kind of today, present. We're not going to have the same API key 10 years from now in an application. So some of that stuff isn't as concerning to us that, oh, they could decrypt our 20-year-old passwords that aren't in use because we've been cycling them every couple of years or something, whatever the requirements are. So there's a piece that we're less likely to have as big an impact as, say, a bank, the Department of Defense, or e-commerce. So
Uh, I have a follow-up question. Sorry, Aaron, do you want to go first?
No, no, no. Casey, go ahead.
Uh, Jake or Allison, do either of you have any like suggestions on how often we should be cycling our CalNet password? So like say if I am not using my CalNet password for any other account, as I'm supposed to, but is it good to kind of mix it up every once in a while just in case? Or do you think it's a matter of just like keeping that protected and not reusing that password anyplace else?
I think the second, and Jake, add your thoughts too. The second is way more important than the first, and this is something where NIST's guidance has changed, where it used to be like every 6 months, every 12 months, or whatever. They've actually moved away from that because it just encourages people to use other unsafe practices like writing all those things down on sticky notes or whatever, because they have to keep changing them. If you only have one password per site, unless that now, when you do want to change it is when you have any suspicion that maybe that password, you entered it into the wrong page or whatever. If that happens, yes, absolutely change it. But just every 6 months because is not really necessary.
one of the problems is people are human and they tend to break the rules sometimes. And so they do tend to reuse stuff. And one piece to keep aware of is if you have a password scheme, like the first word is school, work, or banking, the second word is the computer's name, something like that. Just imagine if two of those got compromised, would they be able to guess the third one? And again, it's not guessing it just by hand, but it's by throwing it in to a dictionary attack or a something like that. Their dates. Let's run through all the important dates in the calendars, things like that. So it's don't reuse and have enough variety that it shouldn't impact things if one is compromised.
Thanks. Aaron.
Yeah, so thank you all again. It was really great. And I'm asking this question, noticing we have a minute left, so I understand it may not be a full discussion. But Jake, you brought up the issue of backup and the importance of that as being an aspect of the protection against ransomware, but also just like a best practice. Scarlett, I think you can also speak to this as a researcher. I guess are there, some existing resources we can share with folks in terms of how they should think about backup? So I think often people are just thinking second copy. They aren't always thinking something that's not connected to my laptop or, my computer. It's not as, that isn't always intuitive. So are there existing things we can share with folks that give them some, sort of best practices to think about? And then the second thing is, are there things like ISO or you guys are thinking of developing to help people think through this? Because I think that it is a challenge of securing not just while you're doing the research, but also, making sure that security follows whatever backups you make over time.
Yeah, I can add this on what's coming up. We are looking at like storage for researcher services and building out a program for that. And one of the things that came through loud and clear that has to include is what we call immutable backups. So that's exactly what you said. You can own the computer, you can own the account, and you still will not own the backup. It's completely gapped away from that. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of great options. There are things you can do on your own. The easiest one is you get a USB drive and you copy the data and then you unplug the drive. They can't touch something that's not plugged in. So that's one option. There are other things I would really say ask Research IT, the consultants there, based on your use case and what you need, what the best options would be.
Great. Thank you. And I just wanted to Thank you all again for being here. We do have some resources. We'll be sending the deck out to all of you along with the recording once it's been captioned. Again, thank you all for being here. And Scarlett, thank you so much for joining us on this. And happy Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which is October. So thank you all.
Thanks, y'all.